Today, we're going to be looking at 3 stories that by the end will leave you with more questions than answers. And all 3 of these stories will be based in France, as I thought that would be quite fitting for my first true crime video. But before we get into today's video, if you like listening to strange and shocking true stories, give this video a thumbs up so I know what kind of content you'd like to see. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you never miss another mystery. Now sit back and relax and let's get into today's video. On Sunday the 23rd of June 1991 at around 11:50 a.m, Ghislaine Marchal, a wealthy 65-year-old widow, was on the phone to her friend Erica organising a lunch for the following day. She told Erica that she was in a rush because she was also having lunch with another friend, Colette, and her husband that day. So Erica says no worries, she hangs up the phone, and Ghislaine quickly gets ready to go and meet up with her friends. Around 1.5 hours later, the friends arrive at the location that they decided they were going to meet up with Ghislaine for lunch, and Ghislaine wasn't there. But they started to become worried when Ghislaine wasn't picking up her phone, and several missed calls later they decided to go over to her house just to make sure everything was okay. After they arrived, they knocked on the door, they tried calling out for Ghislaine, but there was no response, and after a few hours, reluctantly, they decided to leave. The following day, as planned, Erica arrived at Ghislaine's house, but the same as yesterday, there was no response after knocking on the door, ringing the doorbell, and calling out. Erica became really worried because this wasn't like Ghislaine at all. So what she did was she contacted the friends from the day before, and all of the friends met up at Ghislaine's house to kind of problem solve, okay, what are we going to do next? And that's when they decided to contact another friend who then contacted the security for Ghislaine's security system so they'd be able to get in and try to find out what was going on. They slowly opened the door to find that the house was dark and empty. No trace of break-in, tampering, nothing, but also no trace of Ghislaine. Although there was no signs of a disturbance, they did note that Ghislaine's wallet, which was there, had no cash in it, which for those times was quite strange, and like I said, Ghislaine was pretty well off. The bed was unkept, the breakfast tray was still in the sink, and there was a pair of glasses next to the newspaper. It seemed as though Ghislaine had literally woken up and then vanished. A few hours later, the police would arrive, and after searching the entire main house, they started making their way down to the stairs that led to the basement. They found that the basement door was locked, and after managing to unlock it, they thrust it forward, only to find that there was something obviously blocking it, something really heavy that only allowed them to get about 2 centimeters. After the police continued to violently push the door to the point of it even bending, one of them was able to reach around with their hand and try to feel what was blocking the door, and that's when they realized it was a folded up bed and some kind of metal rod that was wedged in between the crack of the actual door. After a few more pushes, someone was able to reach their leg in and kick the metal rod out of the way, which inevitably freed the door. The group made their way into the basement, and at the very back was the boiler room, and once they opened the door, everyone's worst fears were confirmed, and that's where they found a horrific scene. Ghislaine's lifeless body laying across the ground with her clothes soaked in blood. It was clear that this had been a very violent murder, and later the autopsy would reveal that she had been hit in the back of the head with a large triangular object, as well as several stab wounds to the chest and abdomen, and also to the thigh. And on top of that, many defense wounds on her hands and fingers as well. There was also evidence of the dust that was on the garage floor and scrapes along the backs of her legs and ankles, suggesting that maybe at one point she was dragged. It is uncertain in which order these blows were given, but it was determined that she didn't die instantly and that her injuries would have been so bad that it was likely that she wouldn't have been able to stand up. Officers in the basement would then make a huge discovery that would shape the rest of the investigation. On one of the doors in the basement, written in Ghislaine's blood, was Omar m'a tué, which translated in English is Omar killed me, although there is a small grammatical error on the word killed. In a different area of the basement, closer to where the body was found, they saw it again, but this was not finished and it was barely legible, and it was just Omar m'a tué with a T and unfinished. It is thought that since this message was closer to the body, then maybe she was writing this when she was very, very close to the end of her life. It was also noted that investigators were surprised to see the basement having so much blood with such a brutal crime, but not a single drop of blood on the stairways leading back up to the house. After investigators found the inscription on the wall in blood saying Omar killed me, they needed to figure out who is Omar, and that's when all eyes turned to Omar Raddad, who was Ghislaine's gardener for the last 4 years. What followed was a lengthy trial that divided France even to this day about whether or not Omar is innocent or guilty. While the prosecutor focused on the bloody message as the main piece of evidence against Omar, they brought in lots of handwriting experts to compare the handwriting on the wall and the handwriting of that of Ghislaine. The conclusion being that it had to have been Ghislaine that wrote that, while Omar insisted that he was being framed. Another difficult question remained: if the victim was too wounded to stand, then how would she have barricaded herself in? Did she barricade herself in, or did the killers somehow barricade it from the outside? And I'll insert a picture here of investigators actually doing a demonstration of how you could barricade it from the outside just with one arm. The defense highlighted several questions that couldn't seem to be answered, such as why would Ghislaine, an intelligent, wealthy woman, make a grammatical error? And even stranger, who would write that someone has killed them while they're still alive? Omar was actually working the day of the murder, and he was on his lunch break at the exact time of the murder, which is very suspicious. But when he returned back to work after his lunch break, he was wearing the same clothes and he didn't have any blood on him, let alone scratches, nothing. He didn't have anything on him. Omar stated that during his lunch break he'd been at a bakery to get lunch, and he described this bakery to the police. The police noted it, and they went to go check up and see if people had seen him that day. When they went there, no one had seen him at all that day, completely destroying his alibi. And unfortunately, it would be years later that we would find this was actually the wrong bakery. On top of that, it's also noted that none of Ghislaine's neighbours had seen him that day, stating that they have a full view of the entire road leading up to her house. Despite these mysterious questions, Omar was sentenced to 18 years in prison, and he was released in 1998 after serving less than 8 years. In 2002, with advancements in DNA, it was found that there was actually the blood of a man mixed in with Ghislaine's at the crime scene, and after doing analysis, they found that it wasn't the blood of Omar Raddad. Furthermore, in 2015, new DNA discoveries were made when they found 4 fingerprints of 4 unidentified men in the basement. These fingerprints were on things such as the doorknob and the rafters. Since none of these fingerprints corresponded with that of Omar's, this created even more doubt in the community as to whether they found the real killers. To this day, even though he's free now, Omar is determined to have his innocence recognized, while others believe that Ghislaine identified her killer herself before she died. The Dupont family was made up of husband and wife Xavier and Angèle Dupont, and their 4 children, Benoit, Anne, Thomas and Arthur, aged between 13 and 21. On Sunday, the 3rd of April 2011, the family, excluding Thomas because he was at college, went out for a nice meal in their hometown of Nantes, and after they enjoyed watching a film at the cinema. The following day, Anne and Benoit, the 2 youngest children, didn't show up to school because of a mysterious illness, and their friends weren't able to contact them via phone or text. That's when the friends remember a rumor that they heard that the family was going to relocate to Australia, but they didn't think that their friends would leave without saying goodbye. That night, Xavier and Thomas, who was the son who didn't go to the dinner the night before, dined at a restaurant in the town that Thomas was doing his studies about an hour and a half from Nantes. Although seemingly unrelevant at the time, later 2 waiters would recall that Thomas seemed very unwell, especially towards the end of the meal, and that Xavier and Thomas barely spoke the entire time that they were there. The next day, Thomas was at his friend's house where he was planning on staying the night, but that's when Xavier, his father, called him and told him to quickly come back to their home in Nantes because his mother had been in a cycling accident. So Thomas, obviously being very concerned, quickly finished his meal and he jumped on the next train, getting home that night at about 10 p.m. The following day, the friend would try to reach Thomas, but he only received short responses in reply saying that Thomas was very sick and that he wouldn't be coming to class because he was so sick. 2 days after Thomas' departure, his friend received a message saying that Thomas' phone was about to die and that his dad was looking for a charger for him. Unfortunately, this would be the last time that Thomas' friend would ever hear from him. In the following days, there was growing concern for the family, and this became even worse when Xavier sent out 2 letters. The first letter was to his children's school, stating that the children wouldn't be returning because the whole family was moving to Australia due to urgent professional reasons. The second letter was to Xavier's immediate family, saying that he'd actually been employed by the American Drug Force Administration, and after things had turned south, his family were going to go into the Witness Protection Program and that they were all moving to the United States. He also stated that none of them would be able to contact any of them for at least a few years, and to circulate the rumor that the family was moving to Australia on social media. An investigation began to locate the family and wanted notices were issued for them, but unfortunately on April the 21st, police would make a horrific discovery at their home. The remains of Angers, the 4 children, and the 2 family dogs were found buried under the patio in the backyard of the family home. During autopsies, doctors would later find that all 4 of them had been drugged and shot in the head, likely when they were asleep. A huge manhunt went underway for Xavier, who was missing, and police found that he'd been staying at several hotels since he had emailed those strange letters to the school and to his family. They'd also found that he'd made suspicious purchases in the days before all of this had gone down, which included cement, a shovel, bullets, and 40 kilograms of lime or calcium oxide. Some other strange activities had taken place, including all of the family members' bank accounts being closed. The lease of the house had been terminated. Xavier had even phoned his wife's work to tell them that she was really ill and couldn't come into work, and this was followed up with a resignation letter saying that she was following her husband Xavier to the US. The house had been partially emptied, and there was a letter on the mailbox saying, "Return to sender, thank you." Neighbours would later recall that they had seen Xavier around this time loading large bags into the back of his car, and they kind of assumed that the family was maybe moving or going on holiday. A potential motive was established as they found out that Xavier had actually chewed up his wife's savings trying to start a business, and also 50,000 euros he had borrowed from his mistress, who was actually taking him to court because he couldn't pay her back. Due to his debts, he had shared with his friends a year prior that he had 2 options: either kill myself in my car or burn down the house while everyone is asleep. Angers, who was devoutly religious, posted on a number of Catholic forum sites, and one of them she states that she asks Xavier if he's happy, and his response is, "Yes, I am, but if we could all die tomorrow, I would be happier." He also told her once that all of us dying in a mass suicide wouldn't be the worst thing. In an email he wrote to his mistress in 2010, he declared, "I'm awake almost every night with these morbid ideas. Burning the house down after giving everyone sleeping pills. Most of the time I'm not in a dream but a nightmare, and I can't escape, except, of course, by doing something radical and final." They located his car at the very last hotel he'd stayed at, which was very far south from their home in Nantes. Using CCTV footage, they were able to locate his last location, where he ditched his car and disappeared with only a backpack on his back. Police, believing he had committed suicide, searched the entire surrounding area, but no body was ever found. This leading to many speculations, such as him getting plastic surgery or moving to another country to start a new life. An international arrest warrant was then issued, and even though he is the most wanted man in France, his sister, her husband, and their mother still believes that he was framed, and this is all some big conspiracy. The question remains, is Xavier alive? And if so, where is he? On October the 16th, 1984, it was a regular day for Christine Villemin, who was going to pick up her 4-year-old son Gregory from his nanny. When they return home, she gives Gregory a little beanie because he wants to go play in the garden, and she begins to do some ironing, turning up the radio so she can listen to her favorite program. About 25 minutes later, she decides she'll go check up on little Gregory, and when she goes into the backyard, she can't see him anywhere. She instantly begins to panic when she can't see him, and she quickly jumps in her car to start driving around the streets, thinking that maybe he wandered to one of the neighbors' houses, or even back to his nanny's house, who didn't live that far away. But when she talked to everyone, they unfortunately told her that none of them had seen him. Not long after, she frantically alerts the police of Gregory's disappearance, and at the same time this is all happening, Michel Villemin, the uncle of Gregory, received a very disturbing and mysterious phone call. On the call, it was the voice of a man, and it stated that, "I took revenge on the boss and kidnapped his son. I strangled him and threw him into the Vallon River. His mother is looking for him, but she won't find him. My revenge is done." Alerted by this, it was only 4 hours after Gregory had initially gone out into his garden to play that his body was found pressed up against a dam in the river with his arms and legs bound. The following day, a letter addressed to Jean-Marie Villemin, who was the father of Gregory, claimed the crime. The letter said, "I hope you will die of grief, boss. Your money won't bring back your son. This is my revenge, asshole." They found that the letter was mailed yesterday, which was the day of Gregory's murder. Unfortunately, letters such as this and phone calls were not uncommon for the young family, and they'd actually been receiving anonymous, aggressive calls and letters for a year now. A lot of these letters contain personal information, leading them to believe that it was a family member or a close friend. And in these letters, they often referenced Jean-Marie as boss. And in one of them, it even said that he hated Jean-Marie so much that when he dies, he's going to spit on his grave. The investigation into the 4-year-old's murder was seen to be clear-cut at the beginning. You find who has been writing the letters and you find the murderer. But unfortunately, it wasn't as simple as it seemed. Judge Lambert, aged 32 at the time, was under a lot of pressure from the media, and critical mistakes were made, such as not doing a proper autopsy and not securing the crime scene. Seemingly out of nowhere, Bernard Leroche, the cousin of Jean-Marie, Gregory's father, was arrested for the crime. As it turns out, this large family was full of jealousy, mistrust, and secret. Laroche fitted the bill perfectly. Handwriting experts claimed he wrote at least 2 of the letters, and his sister-in-law, who was only 14, 15 at the time, stated that he picked her up from school the day of the disappearance of Gregory and the murder of Gregory, and that he went to the Villemin's house, picked up Gregory, and headed for the river. When he went out to the river without her, he returned without Gregory. This was a critical piece in the arrest of Laroche, but only 2 days later, his sister-in-law retracted her statement, saying she made up the whole thing due to pressure of the interrogation. She said, in fact, that her and Laroche were at home together at the time of the murder, giving him a solid alibi. There was a lot of speculation that the family had forced her to retract her statement, although to this day she claims that she made the whole thing up and that she takes full responsibility for what happens next. Judge Lambert orders for Laroche to be set free because now they have no evidence, and less than 2 months later, Jean-Marie confronts his cousin Laroche with a gun on his driveway. Laroche pleads with Jean-Marie to come inside so that they can talk it out, claiming that he had nothing to do with the death of his son, but unfortunately Jean-Marie had already made up his mind, and in his eyes Laroche was guilty, and that's when he shot the gun and killed Laroche on the driveway in front of his family. As Laroche collapsed to the ground, with his dying breath, he said one more time, "I did not kill your kid." The police were heavily criticized about this and how it was allowed to happen because Jean-Marie had said to news outlets that he was going to take his revenge. It was thought that maybe Jean-Marie was triggered by the fact that Judge Lambert has started pointing the finger at his wife, Gregory's mother, because of the similarities with her handwriting and the handwriting in the letters, as well as some rope was found in their cellar that matched the rope that was found on Gregory's body. On top of that, there was an eyewitness stating that they had seen her outside of the post office around the time that that letter would have been sent. The accusations against her would be dismissed and Judge Lambert would be taken off the case and heavily criticized for his erratic behavior, including arresting people without enough evidence and doing interviews with the media. He was also dubbed Le Petit Juge, or the Little Judge. In 2017, Judge Lambert was found dead in his home with a plastic bag over his head, police concluding that it was a suicide. Lambert sent out suicide letters, some to his family and one to a journalist, where he states that the Gregory case has always haunted him, saying that he no longer had the strength to fight and claiming one more time that Laroche was innocent. Today, police say that there was at least 2 people making the anonymous phone calls, a man and a woman, and that there is new technology in Switzerland that may be able to analyze the handwritten letters a lot better and that we might be able to have some more answers. Although lawyers for the family members who have seen the finger pointed at them have stated, in this case, Gregory Villemin was the first victim, Bernard Laroche the second, and Judge Lambert the third. I only hope that these new investigations don't make any more victims. And that's it, we've reached the end. If you're the first to find the clue in today's video, let me know below by putting the timestamp and I'll pin your comment. And if you enjoy listening to strange and shocking true stories, give this video a thumbs up so I know what kind of content you'd like to see. Also, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you never miss another mystery. If you'd like to suggest a story, feel free to message me on Instagram. I'll leave all of my links in the description below. Thank you for watching, your support means a lot to me, and I look forward to covering more cases with you in the future. Until then, catch ya.